Number 8, too many words. This is like Mozart in Amadeus, the king saying to him, "There's just too many notes." Well, what happens here is that I'll read a script and there'll be 8 lines of action description. And oftentimes if there's that many lines in an action paragraph, the action is repeated and it's not become
Right.
concise. And
Yeah.
of course, we want to get our scripts down to 100, 110 pages. And so you've
Yeah.
got to go through those action lines and take out all the extra words. And sometimes you simply don't need 8 lines. You can do it in 4 lines.
Yeah.
Or possibly you take the 8 lines and you divide it up into 2 paragraphs if you need be. But don't put large blocks of text together. Now, there's a bit in my workshop where I look at the best screenplays. One was Django's, Tarantino's Django, and the
Right.
other one was The King's Speech. I forget who wrote that.
Oh,
And The
yeah.
King's Speech is like 95 pages. And if you look at the script, and Django is like 160 pages. And Tarantino, when he writes, he'll write, I mean, it'll be a half a page, single space description of the action. That's just like mind boggling. And you think, how did this win best script? Well, I asked some people in LA that vote for the Oscars. I says, how does this happen? They said, well, it's very simple. No one reads the scripts. They watch the movies
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
they base their vote for best script based
Yeah.
on the edited movie, not on the
Right.
page. But
Right.
of course, to sell a script, you better not have, 16 lines of block action.
Yes.
That's just
Yes.
hard to
Yes.
get through. So that's too many words.
Yes.
Number 9 is that the action lines should always use present active verbs, never passive, never past participles. Try to eliminate in your action descriptions any word ending in ing and ly. Now, that's not always possible, and you don't have to follow that ing, ly um, prohibition perfectly, but make sure that the action you're describing is present active. What I'm seeing on the screen is happening in the now,
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
something that's in past. Novels are often written in past tense.
Yeah.
Movies are always written in the present active. It's happening now. So that's
Because you'll end up showing. I mean, telling, not showing. I guess is what.
yeah, that's showing, not telling. That is related to that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Number
Okay.
10 is I have characters that have no outward goal. In other words, we don't know what the character wants. We have to know what the protagonist wants. In fact, all the characters want. The
Yeah.
conflicting characters um, at the end of Act One. So in Die Hard, the famous coming out movie for Bruce Willis,
Yeah.
we know that um, John McClane wants to get back together with his wife. He wants his wife back, who's left New York and gone out to LA. And they're separated. They're not divorced, but they're separated. And, he reminds her, "You're still my wife." That's his
Right.
goal. The whole movie is about Bruce getting back his goal. And
Mm,
finally, at the end, he's hugging her and kissing her, where
mm.
before it didn't happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we also know that Hans Gruber, played by Alan Rickman, his outward goal, he's the bad guy, he's the
Right.
villain, the nemesis. He wants the money. He wants the tradable shares of stock in the vault in this tower. And he sees himself as Robin Hood. He's stealing from the rich and giving to the poor. And it
Yeah.
just so happens that he's the one that's poor. So they have, and notice that those goals are very physical. They're things that we can see. So,
Yes.
for instance, you cannot have, that's why I say characters they have to have an outward goal. And sometimes my characters, I read scripts that have characters, they have no outward goal. Uh, and the writer will say to me, well, their goal is that they just want to feel good about themselves. And I said, that's not a goal. You can't see that in a movie. How do they feel good about themselves? Well, they're smiling at the end and they're frowning at the beginning. I said, oh, okay, come on. We need something that seems impossible. And this goes back to the one lie, the hook.
Yeah.
What are
Yeah.
they? What is going to make them feel good about themselves? They need to be able to accomplish something impossible.
Yeah.
Well, okay, they want to skydive, but they're afraid of heights. Okay, that's a good goal. So the
Mm.
whole movie is about how this person overcomes their fear of heights so they can jump out of an airplane without a parachute. That's an outward
Squirrel suit.
goal.
Yeah.
But you have to give people an outward goal, and you can't give them a negative goal. This is the converse of number 10. You can't say, well, uh, he's just trying to prevent the police from deporting his mother and father, who are illegal immigrants hiding in the basement. Okay. If your goal is to prevent the police from deporting, or the ICE from deporting your parents who are hiding in the basement, what is true in Act One? Well, the parents are in the basement. Okay. So at the beginning of the movie, he's accomplished his goal.
Yeah. That's a
Doesn't
problem.
work.
Yeah.
Negative goals never work. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are my 10.
Very good. I like them. That's a nice top one. Okay, on the goal, or the physical goal, the yeah, the Die Hard one that's a great example. And then Hans Gruber, like, you think of it now, it's interesting how so much with technology in like the modern day is so intangible. I mean, I guess you could, maybe if he was going after the Bitcoin, you'd have to, like, obviously you'd get to the thumb drive or something like that, or you'd
Yeah,
get
right.
something, right?
Exactly. Well, there's the MacGuffin.
MacGuffin, right?
The MacGuffin. It's the object that everyone was searching for. We've got to get the MacGuffin, and we see the MacGuffin at the end. We see um, the statue of the, what was it, in North by Northwest. But there has to be
Oh,
something physical that we're after.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, very good, very good. One of the things you mentioned on the action and the consequences, like when and maybe this kind of goes into the next question about like screenplays following the right structure, and you got the right beats, uh and sometimes it seems like, well, it didn't connect with the audience, or maybe it does and I missed it or something like that. But like, if the action and the consequence isn't right, then you know that could pull the audience out, right? I mean
Right.
that.
Yeah. And that's,
So
yeah. I think the point there is that your audience you have to present a diegesis of natural law that the audience will recognize. And so
okay,
the consequence, the action taken, in other words, the girl walking down the hallway in a horror movie in her negligee at night, right? I mean, the audience needs to immediately say, don't do that.
right,
That's, you're connecting, right?
right,
And then the
right,
consequence is the bad dude hits her on the head and pulls her into the room.
right.
Well, we understand that. That's
Yeah,
that's going to connect with an audience real easily, because that's what they would expect. So
right.
natural law is common sense. We know that if we step off a cliff, we're going to fall, unless he's got a jetpack on. But then he's put on the jetpack. We see the jetpack and we know that it works. But he's
Yeah,
having a hard time starting it. So
yeah,
don't jump off the cliff, right?
right.
So gravity is part of natural law. Or when, but natural law isn't just physical things like going down the hall. Well, going down the hall kind of implies this, but there's psychological natural laws too. There's moral
Okay.
natural laws, and psychological, natural, spiritual, and moral, those all fit together. So if you see a guy cheating on his wife,
Yeah.
that's a natural law that everyone, even if it's someone in the audience that cheats on their wife, they know it's wrong. They
Right,
know it's
right.
wrong. And just common sense, just natural law, just the ethics of our culture would do that. So
Yeah.
if we do a movie in India, let's say during the 1910, in 1910, when the caste system was still legal in part, there's many
Right.
things that we would see. And if we're a Hindu and we're watching a Hindu guy doing something that's just really rude, in America, but might be totally natural to someone of a caste, a
Right,
particular
right,
a higher Brahmin caste,
right,
just totally disrespecting a delete, an untouchable.
right.
Well, that would be offensive to an American today. But in
Yes.
1910, an Indian movie, no, that would be part of natural law. So
Wow.
you
Yeah.
got to understand your audience that way.
Yes, that makes good sense. That makes good sense. So really, if you build your world right and it's following the natural law and you hit the beats, it should connect.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Just you have to be, and you can show a 1910 Hindu movie. I'm bringing this up because I'm working on a novel right now about missionaries in India from
Oh yeah, yeah,
1908
that's
to
right.
1942, and
Yeah.
caste is a really big thing. In fact, we just came out with a little book called The Widow's Diary that tells the stories of 21 widows who um, as a result of caste, or just well, people in India in 1909 saw a widow as a curse on the family. And I won't
Ah,
go into the reasons, but widows were considered a curse. And so Christian missionaries from America and other places would come and they would establish widows' homes. And here's where widows could go, where their lives were respected and they had dignity, as opposed to trying to live in a Hindu society where they were rejected and
yes,
considered a curse. Um,
yes.
but we could show a movie, like I'm working on this novel now, uh, where those laws of the caste system were in play. And, but I've got to explain those early on so that
Right,
the audience understands what the natural laws of the diegesis are. And then the audience, if they're American audience, modern American audience, they're going to compare those caste natural laws with the natural laws of our Christian moral nation. And we're going to see the conflict. And right away, natural law is going to engage us as an audience because we're going to see, okay, this story's got to go somewhere where the caste system is destroyed or
right,
demeaned,
right, right,
or what are we going to do about this? And
right.
so that engages the audience on a natural law level in both those natural diegesis worlds.
Yeah. Now, what about does it matter how high the stakes are? Like in a sense of, because some movies they work, but it's not earth-shattering, sort of super dramatic, right? Or
Yeah,
um
well, this has to do with there's the saying in LA or in the film industry about having a movie that is high concept. A high concept movie always involves life and death. Um, you can have, or the destruction of a life psychologically, because we had
mhm,
all the psychological thrillers where you might not have had physical death, but you had
yeah,
psychological problems.
Beautiful Mind kind of stuff, maybe,
Yeah, yeah, that sort of
or
thing, right. So you see a marriage and a life torn apart, or
yeah,
we see the brilliance uh, of of a scientist or an intellectual and how they're totally ridiculed, and we feel for that.
yeah,
So, but high concepts have high stakes. And if you have a movie with low stakes, it's going to be harder to sell and less interesting to watch unless you're very clever with the dialogue, like um, Linkletter and Delphi and Hawk did with
right,
those three movies. So you have to understand what you're getting into. It's really easy to. This is why horror movies and thrillers and action movies are really easy to sell. Generally high concept,
yeah,
they're fun to watch, and they have the audience literally physically on the edge of their seat. Where the
yeah,
psychological movies are more difficult, and this is why faith films oftentimes uh, don't understand why the secular audiences don't flock to them, um, because they're all spiritual. They're all in their mind. They're not physical. They
yeah,
try to do some metaphors, and that helps. But ultimately, the stakes are to a common temporal person on earth. The stakes aren't high. For instance, Brian, here's something that Christians probably don't like me to say, but I'll say it right now. Right now, your salvation and my salvation spiritually has no consequence. Why? Because we're not facing judgment right this instant. It's
Mm,
in the future.
okay.
As our salvation, yeah, of course, there's consequences in terms of a Christian is going to live according to natural law, psychological and physical, that God has put in place on earth. And that's going to affect our life. And if we
Right.
don't follow that natural law, we're going to be in the hospital or in jail, right? So there
Right.
is a physical consequence for that. But
Right.
generally speaking, the bigger consequence is heaven or hell. And that doesn't happen until we leave this earth and pass into the next. So
Right.
Christians often sometimes will have these preachy movies and they don't connect because the audience says, I don't get it. What's the consequence?
Yeah. Because they're not interested in death anyways.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe I don't know if this question's too far to even tackle right now, but there's like the independent filmmaker or somebody who's trying to make a film, like they can make their stakes to a certain level of height, right? Before it gets kind of like that movie you're talking about, too expensive to make, or right. So there is how like trying to approach a screenplay with high stakes, but still doable, you know, as you build up your repertoire of movies. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, you have to you have to figure it out. You have to do something. I mean, listen, you
Yeah, that's the hard
don't
part.
don't don't go for special effects unless you have someone to do the special effects for you, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah, yeah,
Come up with a story
yeah.
um, that look. Rich and Josh did the movie.
A great day.
What's it called?
A great day.
Yeah, A Great Day. Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a few minor special effects in that movie, but the special effects don't make the movie work or not. You know,
Right.
it's a good drama. It's a human drama of life and death, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet you don't need any special effects to show it. Not really. You put some in, but they weren't really necessary for the
Right.
story.
That's right.
And so they made a good choice in taking this priest who's dealing with this guilt from the past
Yeah.
and the current situation of of a man who thinks he was responsible for the deaths of this family and the
Yeah.
need for forgiveness and so, but there were physical aspects to that they were able to imply.
Right.
They were
Right.
more implicated. And so
Right.
it's not a high concept movie, but it
Right.
works. And it was a good film. It was very
Right.
watchable
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
good acting, good
Yeah.
casting.
Yeah.
Um, and they able to get the good locations and all that. And so they chose wisely
Right.
the
Right.
the elements of the movie that they could shoot on a budget and
Right.
still make it emotionally strong and
Going
spiritually true, I should say.
Yeah. So make sure you put the work in of just that painful slugging it out until you have something that's
That
doable.
works, yeah.
Yeah.
This is why movies take multiple or screenplays take multiple versions and revisions. Y
Yeah.
and oftentimes it's the story, right? You just
Yeah.
knock around the story with your friends for years trying to
Right.
figure this out till you finally come up with the right number of elements. Hey, we can afford that. We can do that.
So if you'd like to get ahead of this conversation, you can head over to Stan's website. You go to stanwilliams.com and you'll see there he actually has his storycraft training online for free. He just started releasing it. So this is kind of a huge deal. I hope you take advantage of it. I've learned so much from Stan, and we're going to go and explore more points on our next podcast. We'll tackle a few more. Mark your calendars. It's coming up. We're going to have the Lumen Summit, October 2nd through the 4th. It's going to be in Florida, in Jacksonville. And if you are a Catholic filmmaker, if you're a professional Catholic filmmaker, you're invited. So you can go to lumen.tv to learn a little bit more. Next time I see you, hope to see Christ in you.